In a video I made earlier today, I mentioned the reality that a K-12 curriculum is not designed for use in a homeschool context. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that because I think that homeschool parents are exhausted, discouraged, and really just overwhelmed by problems that they don't understand are being caused by the way the modern curriculum works and is designed to work. And let's just start with an example. You may see in the news reports that Catholic schools are closing. This is happening quite a bit, and this is not some crazy story that can be pulled out of the national news and passed around. This is happening diocese by diocese. Sure, some dioceses are doing well, like the diocese I live in, the Diocese of Charlotte, North Carolina. But in many places, Catholic schools are closing. And they close, and for the hundreds of students that attend those schools, that's their only option for Catholic education. And those kids in the following year need to either enroll in a non-Catholic school, like a Protestant school, private school, or they need to go to the public school. And when we think about that, or when I think about that, I just think to myself, how reckless and irresponsible can we be? And the reason I say that is because if we were to ask, why is this school not able to stay open? Why can Catholics not have a Catholic school? Why not? The answer is because the K-12 school model is not financially sustainable. That's why. The K-12 model is not financially sustainable for a private school. I'll say it again. The K-12 model is not financially sustainable for a private school, especially a Catholic private school. Now, when we consider the history of Catholic schools, there was a time when the K-12 curriculum, the K-12 school model could work. And the reason that it could work was because there was a temporary supply of immigrant nuns who could provide the schools with all of the teachers that are necessary for a K-12 model school. That supply of nuns, however, dried up, and that was it. Since the 1960s, Catholic schooling in America has declined. And there's one reason. There's one reason. It's because the Catholic Church has married itself to the K-12 school model, and it's all or nothing. Either the school is going to be a K-12 school, a grade level school, or it's going to shut down. And it's got nothing to do with Catholicism. The K-12 school model was invented by the public schools in the late 1800s. It never existed in church history. It was not invented by Catholics. It was invented by the public schools, and there were two reasons why they could use the K-12 model. Two reasons. Reason number one was because the schools were tax funded. Money was not an issue. No one was accountable to make a profit. No one was accountable to raise money to pay the bills for this plan. It was a tax-funded school program, and that was the first reason that it could work for public schools. The second reason was because the public schools were designed only to provide minimum educational requirements. The public school was designed to take children who had no other option for their education, basically the leftover children, and provide them with a bare bones education that would prepare them for two things. First of all, it would prepare them to be able to live in a democratic society. So it was focused on American citizenship. And the second was to prepare them so that they could contribute in some way to the American workplace, to the American workforce. It was to make them useful workers and good citizens. If you watched It's a Wonderful Life at Christmas time, there's one line that always sticks in my head. It's where Potter refers to the workers as a thrifty working class, the thrifty working class. That's the ideal that the American public school was designed to produce, a thrifty working class of people that could serve the factories and all of the positions that were needed by industrialization. So the public school was designed to serve the bare minimum in education, bare minimum. And it was intended to be tax funded. So there was no need to give an account for how we'd pay the bills. And for the public schools, a K-12 education can work. It's a bare minimum education, and it's a tax-funded education. And it can work in a public context. Now, once we step out of that public context, there's no longer any explanation for how anyone plans to operate a K-12 school sustainably. It doesn't work in private schools unless the tuition is so ridiculously high that the people who need the education can't afford it. And this is what we find in private Catholic schools. We have the pro-life Catholic community celebrating large Catholic families and then planning to charge them $7,000 for elementary school tuition, knowing they have 6 kids. It's not a plan. That's not a plan. And so, yes, we can have a K-12 private school if we're going to charge kids $7,000 for tuition and give them a bare bones education. And you just see, there's no plan. We're just imitating the public schools. Just lazy imitation of the public schools. And if it doesn't work out and the finances begin to fail, we just shut it down. And that's what happens in the private schools. Now let's move to the homeschool environment, because we're concerned with homeschooling in this video. Move to the homeschool environment. The K-12 school model is even less effective as a homeschool model. Let's just ask the question. Before the K-12 model was designed, how were schools organized? The K-12 model was developed in the late 1800s. Late 1800s. If we think that America was established as a nation in 1776, the Constitution was passed in 1789, for 100 years, There was no K-12 school system in America. How were the kids educated? They weren't in K-12 schools. They were taught the way kids were taught all through history. There were individual teachers, either an expert classical schoolmaster who served students who were sent to study with him, or a local schoolmaster who taught the children in the neighborhood, all of them. If you visit Amish country today and check out one of their schools, they run their schools the way they were run in the 1600s and 1700s. There's one young lady, usually, a local Amish girl. She's set as the local teacher, and she teaches all the children in the community. She teaches them all of their subjects across all of their age levels in one school. It's called a one-room schoolhouse. Everyone knows about this because you've seen it. If you've ever watched Little House on the Prairie, you've seen a one-room schoolhouse. Older kids in the back, younger kids in the front, teacher covering all subjects for all ages. That's how school worked before the K-12 public school was popularized. If we go to the homeschool, let's think about what we have at home. For most families, dad's at work during the day, and mom is the school teacher. There's no problem with that. Mom is the school teacher, and she's got a relatively easy job. When we first started homeschooling, we had 3 or 4 children, and I remember I'd come home from work and my wife would be wiped out, telling me how difficult the day was. And I would think to myself, I work in a school where a 28-year-old woman manages a classroom of 25 to 30 kids all day, and it's normal. I come home, and the homeschool mother with 3 or 4 kids is pulling her hair out. How can that be? How can homeschooling be difficult when an adult is responsible for a couple of kids, when we have school teachers handling 30 kids all day long? And the answer was not that my wife was necessarily incompetent or that homeschooling for some reason is so impossible. The problem was the curriculum was designed for a K-12 school, and there's no way that one person teaching children at multiple age levels can fulfill the needs of the children following a K-12 program. There's no way. It's not reasonable. It's not appropriate to bring the K-12 curriculum into the homeschool context, just like it's not reasonable to bring the K-12 curriculum into a private school context. That's not what it's for. The homeschool is a one-room schoolhouse. It's a very simple, small one-room schoolhouse. It shouldn't be harder than the work that a school teacher has to do. It should be easier. It's one adult woman, as I said, usually, one adult woman and a few children. And they're her own children in the comfort of her own house. She doesn't have to go to work. She doesn't have to get out and drive to work like a school teacher. She's not dealing with other people's children like a school teacher. She's dealing with her own children, her own home, her own schedule, her own curriculum plans, and so on. Homeschooling should be easy. It should be simple, it should be affordable, and it should be easy. But when we listen to the homeschool stories, we hear the opposite. We hear that it's terribly expensive. We hear that the parents are, if you look at a homeschool forum or a homeschool Facebook group, the parents are talking about constant breakdowns and emotional distress and all these problems of the kids in the home, and the house is a wreck and the family's upside down. And you wonder, what in the world is going on? 26-year-old college graduates are managing classrooms with 25 kids. How can homeschooling be so hard? And the answer is that you cannot use a K-12 curriculum in a homeschool. You cannot use a K-12 curriculum in a homeschool. It's not designed for a homeschool. It's not designed for the one-room schoolhouse. Think about the local school. The children, large numbers of children, are brought to the school. They're divided into groups based on their age. Totally artificial. They're divided by age. They're then given a schedule where they move from one class to another through the day. They have, let's say elementary school, they have a homeroom teacher who's their main teacher, sort of like their mother for the day. They start their day there. They have English with her. They have math with her. Maybe they have social studies with her. Maybe even science with her in early elementary. It's time for music. They walk down the hall to another teacher, a music teacher. And he takes care of them for the next 40 minutes. The homeroom teacher gets a break. They learn music from a music teacher. Then it's time for lunch. They walk down the hall to the lunchroom. Maybe they eat lunch in their classroom. Lunch ladies prepare the lunch. They get their lunch, they eat. Now it's time for gym. Down the hallway they go, where there's a professional gym teacher waiting for them who teaches them for 40 minutes, and that's all he does all day long is teach gym classes to each different group of kids that comes in. He's the gym teacher, another teacher is the art teacher, another teacher is the music teacher, and the kids move from room to room in the course of a day, and then they're dismissed at the end. When they get to high school, the work of instruction is even more divided. In high school, teachers don't even teach multiple subjects. There's an English teacher, a history teacher, a math teacher, a science teacher, a gym teacher, a foreign language teacher, on and on through the whole entire curriculum. Dozens and dozens of full-time teachers to work with the kids. How in the world is a mother going to do that at home? How in the world is a mother going to replace a dozen full-time specialists in a curriculum? And the answer is, she's not. She's not going to do it. Now, you can start trying to reproduce that. You can say, okay, well, we're going to hire this guy to tutor the kids in music. We're going to hire this guy to teach the kids Latin. He's going to come in on Tuesdays and teach the kids on Tuesdays. We're going to hire this guy. We're going to sign the kids up for this phys ed co-op class here. We're going to drive there, and they're going to have gym class. That is a circus. And the only reason that's being done is because the parent is trying, for some inexplicable reason, to reproduce at home what the public school kids are doing in the K-12 curriculum. And like I said, it's thousands of dollars, it's exhausting days, it's minimal academic standards, because there's just no time for any of that. And in the end, nothing gets done. And we have to hear the homeschool parents complaining about how difficult everything is. There's only one reason why it's so difficult, and it's because what you're trying to do is impossible. It's not even designed for a parent to do with their children. if you would just get rid of the K-12 model and replace it with a plan that actually is suited to the homeschool environment, the troubles would go away. A mother could just relax with her children and teach them through a curriculum designed to be used in that context. If you go back before the late 1800s to the 1870s even, 1850s, you'll find that every single textbook in every single subject was designed for the one-room schoolhouse. It was designed for the teacher working with a small number of children of different ages and abilities in the same basic subjects. The textbooks were designed for that environment. The textbooks were designed for your homeschool environment. But you're using the wrong kind of books, you're following the wrong kind of curriculum, and you're trying to keep up with a method that was designed to be tax-funded and serve children the minimal educational requirements for citizenship and participation in the workforce. And yet you're talking about Catholic faith, Catholic education. You want to talk about saints. You want to talk about philosophers, famous thinkers, authors, scientists. Those people that you're talking about were not educated the way you're educating your children. They weren't. They were either with a private schoolmaster, or if they were taught at home, they were taught in the style of a one-room schoolhouse. That's the natural historical model for education. One teacher, a small number of students, various age levels, various ability levels through the entire curriculum. If your homeschool is not using a program designed for that education, you are going to kill yourself trying to do what the local public school is doing with millions of dollars of funding, dozens of full-time faculty members, incredible facilities, and so on. You're going to try to imitate that at home and totally fail. Because the K-12 curriculum, the K-12 school model, was not designed for homeschools, and it was not designed for private schools. It was designed for tax-funded public schools. So, when you come to the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and let's get back to the story about my wife. I would come home from school after a full day teaching dozens and dozens of students in my classes, and I had no empathy for my wife's situation because I couldn't figure out what the problem was. To stay home and teach the 4 kids would be like a vacation to what I've got to do at school. And I couldn't understand what the problem was. Why was she having such a difficult time? Until I started to see, you've got 4 kids, let's say 3 of them are school age. There's a different grade level book for every subject. They're totally unrelated. The 1st grade math book has nothing to do with the 2nd grade math book or the 4th grade math book. The science book for the 1st grade kid has nothing to do, it's a totally different book than the book that the 3rd grade kid is using for science. You look at the English grammar book. The English grammar book is published by one publisher, and the English grammar book for the older student comes from a different publisher. The definitions in the 2 books don't even agree. They're not even designed to work together. They're just all organized by quote-unquote grade level or age level, shoved in a box and sold to the homeschool families that are left to figure it out for themselves. That's what my wife was trying to do every day. How is she going to get 3 kids through 20 different lessons? in a single day. And again, we're talking bare bones, bottom of the barrel, basic lessons. We're not talking Latin, Greek, philosophy, classical studies, Catholic theology, catechism, scripture. We'll never get to those subjects because it takes all day to get through the arithmetic lessons for all the kids, and the English lessons for all the kids, and the science lessons for all the kids at all their different grade levels with all their different books. And you know what? If we can't do it, if this curriculum is just too difficult, we'll just look and find an easier curriculum where the books are dumbed down. Now we're just doing workbook pages every day. The kids are just filling out, they got a crossword puzzle for science, they've got some goofy activity for the math lesson. It just gets lower and lower and lower until we hear these stories. We finish all our homeschooling by lunchtime every day. Of course you do, because you've chosen to dumb down your children's education so far that it can get done in just a few hours. But you're not accomplishing any of the goals or objectives of historical Catholic education. And that's what happens. If you commit to the K-12 curriculum, you're either going to crash and burn, blow thousands and thousands of dollars trying to pretend you have the money of the public school system, you're going to burn out and break down, or you're going to dumb down the curriculum so far that your kids are basically doing activity books, coloring sheets, and so on, and calling that Catholic education. It's the same problem that the schools are having, the Catholic schools, when they're closing the schools. They're committing to the K-12 model, and they refuse to acknowledge that that's the cause of their trouble. They refuse to think, just think. The K-12 model was invented in the late 1800s. None of the saints that you talk about with the kids were ever educated like that. None of them. None of them. Dominic Savio, Maria Goretti, Aloysius Gonzaga. Go through the list. Go through all the saints and ask yourself, stop buying books, put away the catalogs, stop going to the conferences, and just ask yourselves, how were these kids taught? How did they study? What did their teachers do? How were they taught? How did they accomplish so much? Have you ever looked at the curriculum for a Jesuit school in the late 1500s? Those kids were studying Hebrew, Greek, Cicero, Julius Caesar, Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, sacred scripture, on and on and on. And the schools were free. How in the world were those kids taught? There was no K-12 system. No one ever walked into a room and said, I'm in 3rd grade. Oh, he's in 5th grade. She's in 7th grade. No one ever said that. The saints that you're teaching your kids about were not educated in this way. The famous scientists you talk about, Newton, Galileo, Copernicus, name any scientist you want. They were not taught like this. The philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Seneca, Cicero, on and on, none of them were taught like this. None of them. The founding fathers of America, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, go later to Abraham Lincoln, none of them were taught with a K-12 curriculum in a K-12 school. None of them. None of them. And we have to stop and ask ourselves, what are we doing? And the good news is you can fix it. You can fix it. It's so easy. What you're doing is so expensive, so difficult, so impossible, that if you would just take that model and throw it away it would be over. And you can learn how to manage the education of your own children so simply, so easily, so comfortably in a natural home environment with a model of study that actually works in your home for you, a mother, a homeschool mother, to use with your children. They can have different abilities, they can have different interests, different personalities. No duh, that's how it always was. There were no artificial grade levels by your birth date. All of those problems can go away if you're willing, if you're not stubborn, but if you're willing to step away from the K-12 curriculum and learn to educate your children, not by some other fad, not by something else. Don't replace one error with another because it's got a different name or there's a different celebrity associated with it. Go back to the model of education that was used throughout history, which the saints themselves learned in, which has been proven to provide history's greatest and best men and women with the best education. If you're willing to learn, if you're willing to change, you can fix these problems and enjoy homeschooling. I can tell you last week, one day my wife came up to me and I'm just busy with my work, and my wife said to me, homeschooling right now is like a dream. That's what she said to me. She's got 7 kids. Homeschooling, 3 have graduated and moved on. She's got 7 kids, ages 16 down to 5. And she said, homeschooling is like a dream right now. And the reason why is because we've figured it out. We've figured out how to manage the education of our children in a homeschool context where the education is managed by mom, and mom is not some scientist or genius or philosopher. My wife is a pretty average woman. She has a college degree. She's been a homeschooling mother for 20 years. You know, nothing extraordinary about her intellectual abilities. She's just a diligent, consistent worker who can keep a schedule and stick to the tasks that she's got to work on. And she tells me that homeschooling is a dream for her. And I agree, it is very happy. So I can assure you that if you're willing to learn and not just stubborn, you're not trying to sell something, or you're too proud to admit that what you're doing is not working. If you're willing to learn and willing to change, the problems associated with homeschooling can be eliminated in a couple of weeks. If you'd like to learn more, visit the Classical Liberal Arts Academy website and get in touch with me. And let's just talk and chat and see how we can help you improve things at home and help your kids to learn not just the bare minimum, not just the public school curriculum, but a true classical Catholic curriculum, the kind of education that was enjoyed by the saints throughout history. God bless.